I'll just let them in whilst you two are presenting, okay? So thank you for Daisy and Lauren for attending. So as you'll see on screen, we've got Lancaster University with us today, and they're delivering a session on applying to university and interview techniques. And also we've got Elle and Johnny here, who I'm assuming one of them will be keeping an eye on the chat box, but I will as well. So if you do want to ask questions during, either do come off mute and ask, or put it in the chat box. Or if you want to leave it till the end as well, just whatever you guys are most comfortable with, okay? So I'm just going to shut up talking and let these guys do their presentation. So I'll hand straight over to Elle and Johnny. Thank you.
Brilliant. Thanks, Alex. So yeah, hi everyone and welcome to the session today. Like Alex has said, just put any questions you have in the chat box, or hopefully there should be some time at the end if you want to come off mic and ask a few more questions. So my name is Elle Zientek. I'm a student recruitment assistant at Lancaster University, and I'm with my colleague John. Just to give you a little bit of context to Lancaster, you can see an image of the campus behind my video here, but we are a campus university in the northwest of England. We're about 3 miles out of Lancaster city centre, and we do have some really great travel links to different areas, so it's quite a good spot for being able to go and visit different cities, both those nearby like Manchester and Liverpool, but also further away like London. So myself, I study at Lancaster. I did my degree in English language and linguistics, and as well as this job, I've also worked in a college helping students with their progression into university. So I'm quite used to talking about university applications and interview techniques, as well as doing interviews myself for various roles. So please feel free to ask questions relating to those or just generally about university in the session today. I'll quickly pass over to Johnny just to give his intro.
Great, thanks Elle. Hi everyone, thank you for coming along. Like Elle, I'm a student recruitment assistant at Lancaster, and I also studied at Lancaster University, and I did history. So I did my BA, and then I did a master's in history straight after, and then I liked Lancaster that much that I never left, and I ended up coming back and working for the university. I don't quite have the specialised expertise that Elle has had in her previous roles, but I did have to have an interview to get to this position, and I have experienced interviews before. So please do ask as many questions as you can. This might seem like a very formal environment for the presentation, but please just ask away, anything at all. There's no such thing as a silly question. Back over to you, Elle.
Brilliant, thanks Johnny. So firstly, I'm going to just talk through UCAS, which is the site that you use to apply to university. As well as being the place where you sign up and send through your application, it's also a really great resource just for kind of looking at different universities and different courses out there. They have a little feature called the UCAS Hub, which allows you to kind of track and keep a record of kind of what courses you've looked at, what you like, what you don't like. So it's a really useful tool for exploring universities, but also it's that place that you'll go through to kind of send off that all-important application. So the application itself, kind of broadly speaking, is made up of kind of 4 different sections, 3 of which you'll complete yourself, and 1 which will be completed by kind of likely a tutor at your school or college, or just someone that can kind of put forward a reference for you. So that first bit starts off with kind of fairly general information that you'll be used to kind of putting in on forms. Your personal details, just telling us about who you are, and there's a little bit of kind of your background, your nationality, those kind of things that everyone loves to use for kind of statistical purposes. Your nationality and all those kind of things are never going to be used as a way of universities to kind of look at you. It's purely just so UCAS can look at the data and go, well, so many from this background applied and so many from this background applied. So it's purely for kind of statistical purposes. It won't be considered by the unis, but obviously they do need to know who you are, and so that they can tie it to you. The other big thing about the UCAS form is obviously you need to put on those choices, those 5 places that you want to go to. For the majority of people, those 5 choices will be 5 different universities for perhaps the same or very similar courses. For those of you who might be looking at medicine, dentistry, veterinary science, things like that, 4 of those choices will be for that subject, and then your extra one does need to be for a different subject as a backup choice. But when you're making a decision over what those choices are, you need to look at the entry requirements. So what does the university ask you to achieve in order to get onto their course? A lot of them, it's just basically the grades that they ask you to achieve. But there can be extra things like the fact that you might need to pass an interview, which is why in this second bit, Johnny will be talking through kind of university interviews and how to prepare for them in case that's part of those entry requirements. When it comes to selecting it, we suggest to have a mix of it. So you want to have some that are kind of high achieving options for you, perhaps, so higher grades that they might be asking for, but then also have some more in case things don't quite go to plan. But you need to kind of make sure that all of those choices you put forward are ones that you would be happy to kind of go to. It's important to keep in mind that these entry requirements are then usually what your offers are based off. So they ask for you to achieve, those entry requirements. So it's likely that they're going to then look at your predicted grades. So you kind of want to use your predicted grades as a gauge for where's possible for you to apply to and which courses are open to you. That then leads me to the second section, which is where you need to then obviously tell them about your education history. So you need to talk them through what qualifications you've already done. This is likely to be your GCSEs, and then those that you're currently studying at the moment. You will need to put down grades. So for those you've already achieved, you'll need to specify what grade you got in it. You'll need to have details like the exam board and things like that. So you might need to go and find those certificates and find where they've got filed away. Then, as I say, you'll put forward your predicted grades for the courses that you're studying at the moment. You can also put a little bit about employment on there. So just, the name of who you work for, and give a brief description of your job role by putting your job title. This can be part-time work or just some work experience that maybe you've done for a substantial amount of time. It doesn't have to be kind of anything particularly important. It just is an element where you can show the university things that you've taken part on. This can be really helpful because in this next section that I'll talk through, the personal statement, you might not get a chance to explain and put everything down on there. So if you have done some part-time work, this extra bit can be a good way to put it in rather than taking up space in your personal statement. So what is the personal statement and kind of what is it used for? So this is the biggest section of the application. This is where you're going to spend the most amount of your time. And it's basically about 4,000 characters or 47 lines of text. That's about a side of A4 where you show the university why they should choose you to study that course. You need to show them why you're interested in that subject and what skills and knowledge you have that would make you a good student at that university. They can be used just for considering the cases, so just looking at different candidates and deciding whether they should get an offer from the university for that course. But as we'll kind of explain, if you do have an interview as part of the process, they can also be used to form the questions that you might be asked in your interview. So somebody might pick up on something you've talked about in your personal statement, and at interview ask you to go into a little bit more detail as well. Some courses, part of the entry requirements, they might specify that you need to have done some voluntary or work experience. They might be particularly specific about what that needs to be. So again, if that is the case, you need to make sure you speak about that in your personal statement so that you can show you've met that entry requirement. But generally speaking, most universities don't stipulate, and most courses don't stipulate a particular type of work experience. But if you've done some, it's a great thing to talk about in the personal statement. That final section, so this is the one that is completed by most likely your school or college or an employer, is just a reference. So it's just a chance for them to put forward their thoughts about you. If you've had something go on that you think entitles you to kind of mitigating circumstances that you'd like the university to consider, it's worth making sure that whoever's writing your reference is also aware of this so that they can put it in your reference and include it. So this is likely to be a tutor at your college or school. Just going to quickly touch on the timeline. Again, do look at what your school or college say, because they might have specific ones, but this is just the general deadlines from UCAS. So if you are applying to either Oxford or Cambridge, or you're applying for medicine, dentistry, or veterinary science, the deadline that you need to have sent your application in is the 15th of October. So you need to get it in quite a bit earlier than the rest of those who are applying to other courses. If you're applying for most of the courses, the deadline is then 15th of January. There are some art and design courses where it might fall a little bit later, but again, you need to go with the earliest deadline for any one of your choices, because it all goes in on one application form. So even though only one of your spaces might be for Oxford, obviously the whole application goes in time for the Oxford deadline. Same with if some of your art courses perhaps had the 15th of January deadline, you need to submit it in for that 15th of January deadline, because if you submit it afterwards, the universities don't have to consider your application. Once you've sent in your application, obviously it then hands over to the universities and they'll start looking at your applications and making decisions. Generally speaking, it's about March time where universities have to give a decision back to you about your application, so whether they want to offer you a place or not. Then obviously once you've heard from them, it's back into your hands again for you to then make your firm and insurance choice. So you then put forward basically a first choice, so the university you really want to go to, and then a backup option. With the backup option, it's a good idea for that to have lower entry requirements, so a lower offer, because that's kind of there if you don't manage to get into your first one. So those university decisions, what kind of things are they deciding? So they have to look through your whole application. So they will look heavily at kind of obviously your predicted grades and match them up against the entry requirements they're asking for. But they will also look at that personal statement and see what you talked about in there. They can't see where else you've applied to. So those other choices, they won't know who else you've applied to. They just know that you're interested in coming to them. So that personal statement, again, needs to be fitting for all of your choices. So you do need to talk about things that are relevant to each of the choices you've put forward. They can make 3 decisions really. So they can decide to give you a conditional offer. So they say, well, to achieve these grades, we'll offer you a place. Or they might say, well, we'd like you to come to interview first before we make that decision, in which case you'll then be invited to an interview, and that's what Johnny's then going to talk about later. Or they might unfortunately say that you've been unsuccessful and they don't wish to make you an offer at the university. Once you've got your decisions, as I say, it's then your turn to make those choices. So you can look at the ones who've given you an offer and make a decision over which is your first choice, your firm choice, which is your backup option, that insurance that I talked about. Any others remaining, obviously you would then decline them, so you'd just be left with the 2. Now, it does happen sometimes that perhaps either you didn't get offers back from the universities you applied to, or you've since changed your mind and wish to decline those choices. In which case, if you've got no offers outstanding, you'll go into what is called UCAS Extra. And that basically gives you one more chance to kind of put in an application. So you can pick another university and try for a place with them. If either that is unsuccessful or you decline it, again, you'd get one other choice, but you only get one at any one time. So it can keep repeating, but it won't, you can't put several out at once. You do have to just go for the one offer at one time. Okay, I'm now going to pass over to Johnny to talk through interviews.
Great, thanks, Elle. We'll do the duo next slide, please, routine to get through. Now that we've looked at the overall process of applications, we'll now focus on interviews. And this is going to be really, really relevant for you both when you're thinking about courses, but also thinking about after university. And also during university, you might be applying for part-time work or jobs as well. So a lot of the advice that you'll find in the slides will be very, very transferable. When you're thinking of interviews, they'll most likely come in a few different forms. They'll be like one-to-one interviews where you're chatting to one individual, or they could be a panel approach. So a panel would be yourself, and then on the other side of the table, 3 other people who are there to ask you questions. You can also have group interviews as well. Typically when you're going for employment after university and you're applying for work, you'll actually have a mixture of different types across the day. You might have a panel interview, and then actually you might have a group task or a group interview later on. In a group situation, you're usually given a task to complete, and the people who are interviewing will probably watch the different groups, and they're trying to see how different people behave. And actually, being honest, it can be quite intimidating to be put into this scenario. When me and Elle applied for our positions, we were in group interviews, and you do find that people start behaving very differently in a group interview scenario. You have people who naturally try and be a strong leader, some people who are a bit shy. And if you do ever end up in this kind of environment, the best piece of advice we can give is just be yourself. Try not to do something that you're not. And I think for interviews in general, that's really the first top tip that we can give you is just be yourself, relax, don't try and be too overconfident. You might also have multiple mini interviews, or the MMI, which is common if you're doing medicine. Me and Elle have shadowed the medicine interviews and helped with the behind the scenes admin of the day, and I have to admit that I think even that was stressful. So I can't even imagine how it is to go through an MMI if you're interested in medicine. Certainly do your preparation for that section of the application process, because it can be quite intense. But this is not to put you off at all. This is just being straight, really. It can be quite a stressful experience. And lastly, and probably over the past year, online interviews and video and phone interviews has become something much more common, particularly with the move towards digital. And to be honest, for both of you here right now, having 3 possible panelists with their cameras on speaking to you is kind of a similar kind of experience, really. But the good news is that you've had an entire year to get used to this kind of thing. So don't necessarily see it as a challenge. I think you can probably take a lot of comfort from knowing that you're quite familiar with online delivery. So why do universities interview? So universities want to double check the information on your UCAS application form, really to see if you're best matched with the course and to see how you tick all of the boxes. Also to check if you've actually been telling the truth. Obviously, please don't lie on any application forms, full stop. But they are wanting to, putting that aside, just find out a little bit more about you, and to see if you're able to start on your first year and see the course all the way through into the 3rd year as well. And they're trying to see if you can get to the finish line. But actually, it's really for the benefit of yourself. It's to allow you to find out more information and ask questions. I think sometimes in interviews, you feel like all of the pressure is on you, and you're just, it's quite, you feel like maybe all of the questions are going in one direction. But actually, I would argue it's very much the opposite. Don't forget that this is your opportunity to almost turn it on its head and ask the interviewers questions about their roles and the positions of the course that you're applying for. And I actually think this looks very, very positive. It looks like you're engaged in what you're applying for as well. So always go into the interview feeling prepared. What might you be asked to do? Probably the most obvious one, talk about your application and why you're interested in the course. When you're talking about your interest, just come across as passionate, come across as engaged, and you can't really go too far wrong from there. You might be asked to complete a piece of work, either beforehand to prepare for the interview, or actually during the interview itself. You might have a task which they want you to complete or solve a problem. Sometimes there are myths and legends which are passed around about certain universities coming up with extravagant things that you have to complete. More often than not, they're not true. When you are doing any form of task or completing any form of task, they're just wanting to see how you think. But again, the most important thing you can do is just come across as engaged, positive, and just interested in the course that you're going for. So how do you prepare for an interview? And everyone really has their own way of doing it, but there are certain steps that you can take just to make sure that you feel the most prepared that you can. Always focus on your strengths. Think about how you gained your strengths and how you developed them, and always think about any contribution that you're making in an interview scenario. Why is it relevant? You know, try and avoid going off on tangents. It's important to know your strengths and really focus on them, but it's also good to know what your weaknesses are as well. And when we talk about weaknesses, you know, this is not in a way to make you feel down or to beat yourself up about it. It's just to, if you're aware of them, then you can work on them, and also, you know, you can actually develop them. So if you want to, with your weaknesses, how are you working on them? How do you make up for them? And how can you be positive about it in other ways? Dramatic pause for the next slide. Step 2, research the university and the company that you're applying to be a part of. It's really one of the most basic things that you can do, but you wouldn't believe how many people don't do it. If you are applying for a job, find out who's in the team, find out what their goals are, their strategies. If you're applying to join a department at university, find out what their research aims are. You know, doing this very, very basic research is a great way to find out what the interviewer might be looking for, and it also helps you work out if what you're applying for is right for you. But like I said, what can you research when you're going for an interview? Work out what the values of the university or the company are. Have they actually put something specific in a description to find out what they're looking for? And if you do have this job description or this person specification, try and structure your interview question answers around that, just to tick all the boxes. And also always think in the back of your mind, you know, what makes you the right person for the university or the company. Universities and interviews in general are trying to visualize you in their institution, and the more that you can do to make that easier for them, the better that you can perform in an interview scenario. The next step is figuring out a focus, and the more preparation you can do to keep focused in a scenario which is stressful, like an interview, the better. For your subject, think about what skills will be needed, what values do you have that you can apply, what knowledge will be required for your subject, and you know, you're bound to have this already. So don't feel like you have to do lots of extra work, because you already have these skills. It's just sometimes you don't realize it. So just think, do you have all these skills already, and where have you achieved them? It's a good idea to review some of the current topics in your field when you're applying to university, particularly if you're looking at a department and they have a certain research strength. Just do a quick Google search, find some journal articles or some reading, some wider reading, or even a news article that you can bring up to just keep up your sleeve. For example, if you're applying to do English students might be asked to discuss a piece of writing, whilst math students may be asked to solve an equation. It will be very, very subject specific, but as long as you go in with a little bit of prep and research in the field, then you can't go too far wrong. Step 4, your questions. So asking questions in any form of interview is a really, really simple and easy way to show that you're actually interested in the position you're going for and that you are engaged. Having said that, any questions that you do ask, you know, make sure that they are they're not too obvious a question. You know, if it's something that's in the person specification, which you can already find out beforehand, then maybe they might think, well, have you really read the person specification? If you can think of something which is a little bit different, a little bit left of center, you know, something fresh. I think if you can go into an interview and ask a question to the interviewer which they might not have thought about before, then that can make a really, really good impression. Remember, you're interviewing sorry, get my words out. You know, you're interviewing a prospective university or an employer just as much as they're interviewing you. And like I say, it's a two-way process. Don't just feel like all the pressure is coming at you. So what should you ask? You can ask a variety of things, but you can always start by thinking about what the teaching and assessment methods are like. How much freedom do you have with your modules and your choices? If there is a specific interest that you have, or a research focus that you'd like to go into at university, then this is the perfect time to bring it up. And what we're talking about here is that awkward part at the end of an interview where you get asked, and do you have any questions for us? And what you want to avoid is that awkward silence where both sides of the table start twiddling their thumbs and you both just want to leave the room as quickly as you came in. You want to avoid that as much as possible. So if you can come in with these questions that you can see here, then you can make the whole experience a bit more relaxing. Also think about, what placement work experience opportunities can the course offer you. That looks great because it shows you're thinking long term. You're not just thinking about the course itself, but also about any future employment or opportunities after. You can also ask them, what kind of characteristics, are they looking for from students, just to try and work out if you fit the institution. Different universities have a different feel, a different experience. For instance, Lancaster University offers a completely different experience to going off to Oxford or Cambridge or Newcastle, or the list is endless. Every university has something very, very individual to give, and you've got to work out if that is the right thing for you. Some top tips to bear in mind, and fingers crossed as everything starts opening up again, some of these will become a lot more relevant. The first one, plan your route to the venue and arrive with plenty of time, especially as things are opening back up and you have to maybe drive or you have to use public transport. Knowing public transport and roads like I do, they will always throw you a curveball, and you just don't need that added pressure. You'll already be quite nervous, and as soon as you have a delay, that just adds to the whole experience, and then you arrive and walk in the interview room and you already look stressed. You don't want that. Just give yourself time. Recap anything that you put in your personal statement or your job application, because you will get asked about it, and you don't want to come stuck, because you might feel embarrassed about that. So just make sure that you read over everything that you've submitted first. Try to remain calm under pressure, which is easier said than done, but everyone has their own coping techniques. If you just need half an hour before you go in just to chill, or if you like to read or you like to listen to music, do whatever it takes to make you feel comfortable. Always make sure that you dress and present yourself smartly. If you are in this kind of environment, like you are now, maybe like I have, you wouldn't have birthday bunting behind you. Just think about all these things. All these small visual cues are very, very important. Dress to look the part. Practice with friends and family or teachers or any advisors around you. I know how it feels. You can feel very self-conscious, and the idea of standing in front of people and talking about your application can be the worst thing ever, but they will spot things that you just don't quite realize that are not quite right, and they could actually end up really, really helping you. Be ready for questions about your application. That really goes with recapping your personal statements. Remember, you want to make eye contact, and remember your body language. I'm with my hands all the time. Like, you can't see because the camera's not got it, but my hands are just all over the place. That's how I deal with interviews and stressful situations. So that's kind of a positive way to get around it. Make sure you're not fidgeting. Loads of people always like fidget with their hands. If you can, just put them underneath the table, keep them there. With eye contact, you want to make sure that it's positive, not absolutely dead on, because it's terrifying. And you don't want to scare your interviewer. Just keep it relaxed. And then going back to what we were saying before, keep up to date with anything that's going on. If you can show that you've read an article recently, or there's been some big development, and you can bring that up in your interview, they'll think, oh, this person really knows their stuff. And ask questions. And really do show interest. They just want to see if you're interested in the subject. And if you are interested and passionate, then you'll do that naturally. Remember the key questions, and keep these two questions in the back of your mind as you're going through an interview. Why do you want to study this subject? Keep it very specific and personal to you, and what makes you the right person for the course. And as long as you keep this in mind, then only you can know the answer to these questions, and you've got to make sure that you bring this out throughout the interview process. At the bottom line, tutors are just looking for people who are inquisitive, who are hardworking, and for people that they'll enjoy teaching. You know, like I say, they're trying to imagine you in that environment, and they want to teach people who are interested and passionate. And remember, while you're going to be asked about things you've already you've said in your personal statement, it's a good idea to sometimes keep things back that they might not be expecting, and you can use them in an interview situation just to impress. So always keep something up your sleeve. So what next? After you've applied for a course, and if you are required to complete an interview, your invitation will be sent through UCAS Track, and you have a choice. You can either accept it, which we hope you do, you can decline it, or you can select a new time. If you select a new time, always let the university know. You know, don't assume that they'll know that you've changed it. So just contact them. It's only polite as well. And after the interview, make notes, and please do reflect on how you did. Sometimes you can get feedback, sometimes not. But it's over and done within a flash. And it's actually, as well as a really important opportunity, it's a really important learning experience. And through these stressful situations, you learn a lot about how you cope. And if you just think, oh, actually, I could do this differently next time, just write it down on a piece of paper. You don't have to make an essay about it. Just put 3 bullet points down. Oh, maybe don't do this next time, or maybe do this next time. And then once you've done all this, just keep an eye on track for a response. And obviously, fingers crossed you get the positive response you're looking for, and you can get your offer. Things for your to-do list, specifically with the preparation stage. Find out about predicted grades, what kind of grades they're looking for. This is just a general to-do list, really, for preparing for university. Research universities, research courses, and by research we don't just look at the title, look at the modules, go to the specifics. Make sure that you keep up your extracurricular activities and your supercurricular activities, as well as being really engaged in your subject. You know, universities want well-rounded people to come and study at their university. Get involved in virtual events, much like this. Actually, virtual events have made it so much easier as of late to get involved. Find out more about the UCAS Hub. Do your research on the UCAS process and keep up to date. And also attend uni buddy sessions. A lot of universities have chat functions like Lancaster, who work through companies like UniBuddy, and allows you to get in touch with students and staff. And you also have UniBuddy live events, which are big live chat events to get in touch with departments. And always look at school deadlines as well. Like UCAS has its own deadlines, as Elle mentioned earlier, but actually you'll find that your school will have internal ones which are a bit sooner, just to keep you in check. For upcoming webinars at Lancaster, you're more than welcome to come along, and I'd really recommend that you do. It'll work just like this session today. A bit of a chance for us to present and a bit of a chance for you to chat as well if you'd like to. You can find a complete list of what we offer on the Lancaster University website. Anything from subject-specific sessions from our academics, and our academics do a fantastic job of capturing everything about their course, their passions, and giving you a bit of an opportunity to find out a bit more about the modules as well, and of course content. We also offer webinars on the UCAS process again, student finance, which I know everyone finds fascinating and lovely. I know it might not sound the most interesting thing, but it's very important, so please do come along. And also just about student life in general. And we also have Q&A sessions with current students and our live stream campus tours, which are a new addition, and give you that opportunity to get a feel for a university even though you can't visit. So please do come along to them as well. This is just an example of our ones we offer at Lancaster. So when you go on the website, it'll come up automatically. You'll see the chat function. But for student life and getting an idea of what it's like to be at university, we have our digital content ambassadors who have some really great content on their time at university, their student experience. So do check that out if you have some time. So really, it's just to say thank you very much for attending, and I'm going to pass back over to Alex in a second. This is the time for questions. Now, I know what it's like. Sometimes you just think, no, I don't ask any questions. This is awkward. Please don't do this. But if you do have any questions, now's the best time. But I'll pass back over to you, Alex.
Thanks, Johnny, and thanks, Elle. That was really good. That took me back to when I was 18 and applying for university all over again and going through like the different bits to look out for. So thank you for bringing that up. So I'm just going to leave it open just for a moment. So obviously anyone that's in the call here, so we've obviously got Daisy, Lauren and Rama. If you do want to ask any questions, whether it's in the chat box and just whilst you've got Johnny and Elle here, I'm just going to leave it open just for a moment. Don't worry if you don't have any. I won't make it an awkward silence that we spoke about before. But yeah, if you do have anything, I'll just leave it for a moment if anyone does want to ask anything. And then if, so we've got one here, guys. So what subjects require an interview at Lancaster?
Both going for it. I'll go for it, Elle. At Lancaster, medicine is really our main subject that requires an interview. Also, physics has previously, and so is engineering. But our main one is for medicine. But you'll find that with medicine schools up and down the country very generally, just because of the competitive nature. I think that's all the ones I can think of. Elle, is there any more you'd add?
I think perhaps in the past natural sciences as well might have done interviews. A lot of them don't tend to ask for interviews at Lancaster. If you go onto our website and look at our course list and have a look there, you'll probably be able to find out on there. If not, you can always, if you do decide on a subject that you're interested in and you're interested in studying it at Lancaster, you can also find the department contacts on there as well. And, they're more than happy for you to drop them a message and ask, do you ask for an interview? But generally, they do tend to let you know that will be part of the process, that you'll be subject to being interviewed before they give you an offer. But majority of our courses don't, and I think that's fairly common for most universities, the exception being the likes of Oxford and Cambridge, which will interview for all their subjects.
Yeah, I was just going to add to that, Elle. Yeah, literally, and most courses that I come across as well, you don't need to interview prior. It's just those like sciences and medical courses on the whole, and then like what you just mentioned with Oxford and Cambridge. Any other questions? Obviously, we've had one come through. I'll just leave it a little bit longer, and then I've just got a couple of wrap-up bits.
Could I just ask a question?
Yeah, of course, Daisy. Go on.
So Elle said before about how when choosing medicine, you pick 5 courses to do with medicine, and the 5th would have to be a different subject. Could you elaborate on that, please, and just say anything?
Yeah, sure. Well, fantastic to hear that you're interested in medicine. That's really great to hear. So you get 5 choices in total with medicine. 4 of them, as you say, will be for medicine courses. And then purely because it's just a really competitive course, they do ask for your 5th one to be in a different subject. So common subjects that people tend to go for, things like biomedicine, biomedical science, general, biology, something that's kind of tends to be related but isn't a medicine course. With your personal statement, because it goes to all 5 choices, still write it about medicine. Make it a personal statement about why you want to study medicine. That 5th choice, it doesn't matter. They will be more than used to getting medicine applicants and they'll know, and they're fine with the fact that they're the 5th choice. Because it's likely that other choice, there's still going to be relevant things. Your interest in medicine is still going to be relevant to if it was biology or if it was biomedicine. So because your focus is medicine, make your personal statement about medicine, and then that 5th choice will just also get sent it. But it, generally speaking, that it's not going to affect it, because they know it and they're so used to getting medicine applicants like that. So it's more important for you, and you're going to stand a better chance with medicine, which is what you want to go and do, if you make the personal statement all about medicine. Just concentrate on applying for them. There's lots of great advice online, particularly for medicine, and other subjects as well, about kind of what they're looking for in personal statements. So if you go on universities' websites that have got a med school like Lancaster's, have a look at ours, you'll be able to there'll be information on there that will tell you kind of what they're looking for from applicants. Also, make use of the fact that you can now message current students at a lot of universities. So you can find on Lancaster's, you can filter and find medical students. So you can send them a message, you know, and I'm sure particularly the first years, it'll be fresh in their mind about applying. They'll be more than happy to kind of give you advice on it. But there's lots of help kind of out there. Just make sure that personal statement focuses on medicine. Does that answer everything? Is there any more you'd like me to say?
Yeah, that's perfect. Thank you.
No worries. Best of luck with it.
Yeah, so following that as well.